OneAPIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are OneAPIA Nevada. Concili Incorporated is Nevada's premier Democratic campaign firm. Fighting for progressive issues and candidates for over a decade, and proud sponsor of Battle-Born Progress. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Concili Inc., Nevada State Education Association, OneAPIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt, as well as our episode sponsors, Save Lives Nevada and Washoe Education Association.
Director of Battleborn Progress. We have such an exciting panel for you tonight, talking all about the Supreme Court Justice nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm so excited for this panel. Tonight, we are joined by three people that I respect dearly. First and foremost, our board member, Ketanji Miller. She is a senior trial attorney at the Nevada Defense Group. And then my longtime friend and courts buddy, Anisha Singh. She is the director of Judiciary and Democracy Affairs at the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. And then finally, my new friend, Cedric Lawson, field director at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. I want to thank all three of you for joining us tonight, especially two of you who are joining us from Washington, D.C. this evening. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for being with us with our guests. Ketanji, I want to come to you. So President Biden has nominated Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to be the first Black woman ever on the Supreme Court. What does this nomination mean to you? And can you help us understand why this is so long overdue?
Oh, well, as always, happy to be here. I am Ketanji Miller. I've been practicing law for 20 years, former chief deputy public defender, now lead trial counsel at Nevada Defense Group, the largest criminal defense group in the state of Nevada privately. As far as me, I am ecstatic. There is no other word for it. It is remarkable. It is historic. And the great part about it, it is long overdue. And everyone here, I'm sure, understands that Black people have been in this country for 400 years, and we have never had a representative sit on the Supreme Court. We've had Black males, but we've never had any Black females. And so for that, it is a historic precedence. And as a Black female attorney who has never seen a Supreme Court justice look like me, it is amazing. And I am overjoyed. And I think most Black lawyers in the community are overjoyed.
Well, I am overjoyed. You know, Judge Brown Jackson's background is that she was a public defender. And that is something I think that is so important and so unique and so critical to have sitting on benches all across this country as we really start to think about how we engage and make sure that criminal justice reform is happening. And I think to have that at the highest court, or have a person who has done that on the highest court, is so important. So from your perspective as a former public defender, talk to us, Ketanji, about what that also means.
Well, what that means is you actually have several things. First of all, public defenders actually practice criminal law. We understand trials, we understand procedures, we understand evidence. We also understand all of those nuances that can impact the actual final impact of the case. So just being a trial lawyer is a different type of lawyer. The fact that you're a public defender means by necessity that you have intimate experiences with the poor, which means people who have come from poor economic circumstances, either their whole life or find themselves in poor economic circumstances. And that's just a really different perspective to have versus some of the Supreme Court justices who've never practiced in the public. They've never done any kind of public work. They've never really communicated with the public. We call them ivory tower lawyers, and they stay in their ivory towers. And the perspective is just that. It's that from on high looking low, whereas public defenders are always considered in the trenches. And having someone with that kind of background help examine criminal cases or even civil cases, she's done everything as a district court judge. She has an impeccable legal background. So not only does she have that diversity, but she also has the connection to the community. She's been in DC her whole life. I went to Howard undergrad, very familiar with DC, been to her district court, not while she was there, but I've been to her district court. And it's just a different type of environment coming from that urban, having the experience of a lot of that will mean violent crime, a lot of that will mean drugs, and to understand the cycle of all of those things and understand how poverty impacts behavior. And when you have someone who is, and everybody understands the role of the Supreme Court, they create the law, they establish the law, they say what the law is. You have someone who can interpret the impact of that law in a very granular way that most of the other justices just can't do.
Yeah, and I think it's also important because only 7% of our federal judges overall have come from a public defender background. So when we're thinking about the courts overall, all across the country, our federal court system, why do we need more public defenders in those courtrooms as well? What does that also mean as cases move up to the Supreme Court or as cases are decided at the federal level?
The reach of federal law is broad, large, and it can actually change everything on the ground. When a new Supreme Court case comes out, all the lawyers' phones light up. All of us try to read it and try to figure out how it's impacting our current cases. But even beyond that, you can see how over time, she's 51. So I'm very hopeful that she will get to her seat, but that means that she will have not only that dramatic and diverse background, but that background and her personal experience will affect that court for hopefully 4, maybe 5, well, maybe 5 is a stretch, hopefully 3 decades in the future. So just the way that the Supreme Court works and its rulings affecting every single federal court, federal law affecting state law with regards to constitutional rights and how they're construed, and even some federal laws like some people don't realize it, but our marijuana laws, right? Even though marijuana is legal here in Nevada, the federal prohibition still means that employers can use it against you. And she has the knowledge and the foresight to understand that what happens on the federal level actually impacts the states and impacts people in a very direct, concrete way. And so one slight change of the bench, we know that the bench will still be conservative, but it will actually make them address those concerns from a lawyer who's been in the trenches, and it can't be a theoretical proposition. We've noticed over the last year, especially, the rulings that have come down have been framed in sort of a theoretical way. Like, well, obviously this is the way it works, where in practicum, everyone knows that is not the way it works, but that's the way it should work, but that's not the way it really works. And so once you have a trial judge and someone with her background, she can say, no, that's not the way it really works. And that can have dramatic impacts for everyday citizens, from their traffic stops to how they go to school, or even how they practice their religion. Coming from a different perspective changes the way the law has to be addressed. So I think her perspective will help everyone across the country, even though it's just a federal seat.
Thank you for that, Keisha. All right, Anisha, I want to bring you in. We've worked on this issue together for a really long time, since I came to Battle Born Progress. And this has been something that's super exciting for us, I think, not just in your role at Planned Parenthood Action Fund, but just like as a woman who cares about the courts, right? So with President Biden's nomination of Judge Brown Jackson, the president is continuing in a pattern of nominating a record number of women, and specifically women of color, to our federal courts. Can you put Biden's increased focus on a judiciary that looks like America into context of the past few administrations before him?
Thanks so much, Annette. And it's so great to be on and back with friends. Again, I'm Anisha Singh. I'm the Director of Judiciary and Democracy Affairs at Planned Parenthood Action Fund, leading the Judicial Nominations Program there. And formally, worked with Annette while I was at Center for American Progress, leading the Why Courts Matter campaign. And, Annette, you'll remember from that time, we were dealing in the beginning of our relationship working on this, we were dealing with a lot of obstruction coming from Republican senators when President Obama was in office. And what we had in the last 2 years there was over 100 vacancies that just got built up in preparation for a new president, basically. President Obama did a wonderful job of nominating diverse individuals, but he just didn't have as much luck in filling it as quickly. And that's because there were certain rules in place. For district court nominees, we were still debating for 30 hours. We still had the blue slip for circuit court nominees. And there was a lot of respect for that process coming from the Obama administration. What then shifted was when, Trump came in. He kind of dismantled a lot of that. Him and McConnell were able to jam through at a record speed at the time, nominees throughout our circuit and district courts. So they got rid of the blue slips for circuit court. They lowered debate time to 2 hours from 30 hours. And we were just seeing time and time again, white, male, I'm going to call them, what's the saying? Male, pale, and stale nominees being confirmed. But in all honesty, right, we were just seeing the same cookie cutter type of individuals who had conservative backgrounds that were really harmful for women, for people of color, our voting rights, LGBT rights, in immigration, everything that we care about. And so, and we're seeing, and we saw too, across the country, abortion bills were being introduced at record speed, voting right restriction bills being introduced because Republicans knew that they weren't going to win through legislation. They were going to win through the courts and have these exact bills be challenged in the courts that they then have instilled and appointed these individuals. And so that was a huge legacy that Trump created for himself. The good news is that Biden has been doing such a wonderful job with the rules that McConnell and Trump kind of dismantled. Biden has been able to also, confirm nominees at record speed that are incredibly diverse. We're seeing numbers and the first of many things. I think we have our first openly LGBT woman to sit on a federal appeals court, the first Muslim American federal court judge. More Black women to circuit courts than any other president. 67% of Biden's judicial appointees have been people of color. Nearly 74% have been women. And we're seeing that come to fruition, which is exciting. To your point, it's so much work that we've been doing for so many years. To see this kind of a day come through, where we now have our first Black woman nominee for our Supreme Court, it just makes all that hard work seem worth it.
So Anisha, I want to talk to you about two things that we've worked on previously. We have seen a history of the right doing a far better job of the left putting people on the bench for lifetime appointments. The Supreme Court is a lifetime appointment until somebody retires, as we just had. So talk to me about why we as the left have to continue doing a better job at this. And we can't lose momentum, with just President Biden. This has to be an ongoing thing that we continue. This is not a one and done kind of deal. We have to make the courts a priority and give some examples of why we have to make those courts a priority.
Yeah, every single issue we care about hits the courts. Annette, you and I used to talk about this all the time. We were in a place where we would talk to folks, that we work with, and they would say, well, the courts are something that the lawyers do, right? Meanwhile, you had conservatives who were calling their senators and really engaging about the courts in ways that you would any other issue. And we saw, they've been doing that, conservatives have been doing that for 40 years plus, over what progressives have been doing, and they've been building up this kind of pipeline that they have. And there's a lot of catch up. And I remember, I'll never forget, and I always bring this up. I remember talking to a senator once and asking, why aren't you being a little bit more aggressive? And this was when Obama was president. There was obstruction by McConnell, and one of the nominees that the senator was pushing for was not being even given the light of day for their hearing. Why aren't you pushing more? And he was like, I'm not getting calls. No one is asking me to do it, but I'm getting so many calls from the right to not do anything. So It's just a reminder that, if we don't speak up, they will. And we need to be the ones to speak up. It's so important to organize around the courts the same way we organize around any other issue, the way we did for the Affordable Care Act, the way we always have for, to fight against the Muslim ban, whatever it is. Those same issues end up in the courts, and we need to be talking about it the same way. And I think people started getting, and I think with Kavanaugh, we really saw people like organizing. It's one of the reasons I came to Planned Parenthood to do this work, is that energy that I felt around that fight and that shift. And I know this isn't an electoral conversation, but, one last thing I'll say here is 2016, we saw a lot of folks being interviewed saying, Trump's not my first choice, but there's a Supreme Court vacancy, because at that time there was the Scalia vacancy. And so I'm still going to vote for him. And Trump won. And, we did not see that on the left. You did not see people saying, well, Hillary's not my first choice, but because of the Supreme Court vacancy, polling wasn't showing it. It wasn't coming out in the media. That shifted this last presidential cycle. We saw a lot more progressives saying, well, I'm worried about the courts. The courts have been dismantled. We need to fix it. And that's huge. So we should all be, patting ourselves on the back for sure. But like you said, there's just so much more that we need to do. They've done a lot of damage. We need to rebalance and restore all the courts, to what they used to be, to that integrity that we expect, upholding the Constitution, upholding the rights, and working for all of us. And we can't do that until all of us are getting engaged on the issue.
I think your point around Kavanaugh is so important, because that nomination still, as you were saying, it literally makes me sick to my stomach. As somebody who has, a story of my own around those situations, that nomination physically made me sick, because we are promoting a white man who was not qualified to the highest court in the land with all of these other issues. Why is having diversity of thought so important on these courts too? Because I can tell you right now, Kavanaugh and I have absolutely nothing in common, but I bet I have quite a bit in common with Judge Brown Jackson and some of the stuff that she's seen, being a woman in this line of work. So talk to me about that diversity of thought and why it matters on courts like this.
That's something we say all the time. It's not just, the racial diversity is so important. The gender diversity is so important, but it's that experiential diversity that is equally important and talked about, I feel like, the least, where a judge has to be able to empathize and understand the perspectives of the individuals coming into their courtroom. And it's really hard to do that if every single person comes from a corporate background and the same, prosecutors and just coming from that same background. You're not getting that diversity of experience to really understand. And especially when we're talking about a court with 9 individuals, you want to make sure they're all coming from very different places to really understand all sides. And so it's so exciting to have this historic moment, to have a public defender come onto our court and bring that, and not just a public defender, someone who's a woman, someone who's a person of color, Black woman. She has worked in so many diverse fields and areas, and amongst so many great legends that, her experience is what excites me. It's exciting to think about the kinds of decisions she will bring forward, the dissents that she will write, the conversations you can imagine that will happen behind closed doors with her colleagues to really push them to think a little bit more boldly and a little bit more empathetically with those who come before them. So it's critically important, and it's exciting to think that is finally coming to the court.
All right, Cedric, I want to bring you in, and we'll come back to our other 2 speakers as well. You do a lot of work around the courts federally, and you've also done a lot of work in states, like what Anisha and I were just talking about. So what does organizing around federal courts look like under the Biden administration, and as opposed to like the Donald Trump administration? And are state and federal coalitions still growing, remaining active? Where is the left on this issue right now?
Great questions. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cedric Lawson. I am field director at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Leadership Conference is a coalition of over 200 national organizations, big ones that like the NAACP, ACLU, HRC, known by acronyms, of course, smaller ones as well in faith communities, education, disability rights. And we work to advance civil and human rights legislation. And uniquely, we work to advance the nominations of federal judicial nominees that are supportive of civil and human rights. With that said, we are in a funny moment when it comes to the White House as well as the Senate. So when thinking about the immediate past administration, for the most part, and I know Anisha knows this, in our work together, we were mainly in opposition of the nominees that the Trump administration was putting forth. Pale, stale, and male for the most part, and that was deliberate. It was deliberate in erasing the experience that could be a part of the federal judiciary, considering the white supremacist overtones and undertones of the Trump administration. With that said, we've done a lot of work with the Biden administration to ensure that the nominees are not only demographically diverse, but experientially diverse. And we're working to make sure that in cases where communities have been underrepresented so far in a number of the nominee slates that the Biden administration has put forth, that we're taking note, that the administration knows that we're taking note, and we work in coalition to ensure that no community is left behind when it comes to ensuring that they're represented in President Biden's nomination slates. When thinking about the Senate, I say it's funny because it feels like in many cases, night and day between the Trump and Biden administration, not all cases, but certainly when it comes to judicial nominations, especially when thinking about the Circuit Court and the Supreme Court. But when we think about the Senate, it's been a really close margin for the past 10 years at least. And we're at the closest margin we can be at right now, which is, as I like to call it, 51-50. So when we think about the close margin of the Senate, that means that we are working in a bipartisan fashion to engage folks on both sides of the aisle, senators on both sides of the aisle, to ensure the confirmation of federal judges that support civil and human rights. When thinking about the work that we had to do in the Trump administration, it was about ensuring that some nominees, of course, were not confirmed. So what did it mean for us to engage with Republican senators to share why it was important that a particular nominee was not confirmed? When thinking about Ryan Bounds of Oregon as a nominee, it was important to highlight that there were a number of racially insensitive remarks that this individual had made in the past. And that could be, and we certainly saw it as potentially impactful related to how this person would rule if they were a federal judge for a lifetime. So we were able to effectively engage the senator from South Carolina, Senator Tim Scott, to ensure
it's
that
late there. We'll excuse you. Don't worry.
It's like Jeopardy. You got to give me a little time to effectively engage Senator Tim Scott in ensuring that the nomination process did not continue and Ryan Bounds was not confirmed. So we see the opportunity in engaging senators on not only both sides of the aisle, but to segue into your next question, what it means to engage state-based coalitions across the country. So naturally, there are coalitions that we're going to engage in states like Maine, states like Alaska, engaging leaders in states like Georgia and West Virginia and Arizona, considering that in some cases, these senators are kind of in the center, if you will, or they're in the center on a number of other issues, but we want to make sure that we're effectively engaging them in the judicial nominations issue and showing that we can work with them, even if they disappoint us in some other civil and human rights issues. So with that said, we understand the point of ensuring that the state-based coalitions are consistent, that they're growing, that if we are not in a place where we have a strong state-based coalition, that is diverse in terms of organizations, representing a myriad different communities, that we're engaging leaders in those states to work with their senators. We're cognizant of what it means to engage those leaders and coalitions in the selection processes that senators engage in, to provide recommendations to the White House, because of course the president is the individual who makes those nominations. However, of course, senators do engage with the president and Senate leadership in those processes. So we see the need for a multi-pronged approach in engaging those state-based coalitions and helping those state-based coalitions grow, understanding what it means to develop and cultivate a leadership pipeline, and what it means to share with grassroots advocates who may not have a coalition yet or need to be plugged in, how important they are in these processes. When it comes to I'll just say a big ticket issue on the Hill, like healthcare or reproductive rights, which of course is healthcare, economic security, tax credits. If a Senate office gets, say, 400 calls in a day, especially when a piece of legislation or a budget is slated to pass, that's normal. But getting 40 calls on a judicial nominee, that's huge. So making sure that advocates are aware of their power and what it means to effectively organize their own constituencies. What does it mean for leaders, whether it's pastors, engaging folks in church basements, whether it is working with a federated organization like PPFA or NAACP with their state leadership, whether it's working with students who are just excited to learn and to get a grasp on the importance of the federal judiciary. There are so many different entry points for us as organizers to start that important groundwork of cultivating leaders, building that leadership pipeline, building those state networks that can turn into longstanding coalitions to effectively hold decision makers accountable. We may not win every time, but we can win in terms of ensuring that judges that support civil and human rights are on the courts for a lifetime, but then also these coalitions can be utilized to advance other important issues that we care about.
Cedric, you don't know me very well yet, but I have a tendency to be blunt when it comes to these things. Often I refer to the Senate as a place where dreams go to die. And it has been a great example this year of a place where my dreams have gone to die. How do we engage with Democrats who have previously on critical issues like Build Back Better been obstructionists? I'm talking about Manchin and Sinema, of course, but also people who are reasonable on the right, like Mitt Romney, who we think we could probably bring along on this nomination. Like, how do we engage with those folks to ensure that they're going to get the job done here?
Absolutely. I think that what it takes is a homegrown strategy by individuals in the state who are aware of what it takes to effectively engage their senator. And to the extent that it's helpful, buttressed by national organizations that are prepared to support these state leaders in doing that work. So when I think about a state like, as you mentioned, Arizona or West Virginia, we need to effectively work with the state leaders who will be the best messengers. Now, there may be folks who have been oppositional toward a senator related to voting rights, related to economic security, related to immigration, the list goes on. As you say, where dreams go to die. But what we know is that this is a very unique niche issue where we can engage people and make them understand that all is not lost. You talk about our opposition having understanding about the power that the third branch of government has. We have a duty here as organizers to, in my own words, demystify, diversify, and democratize the third branch of government. This is our time to do that. We are at somewhat of a lowest point when we think about how many judges that were confirmed under the Trump administration and through the leadership of Mitch McConnell, 233 out of 870. So we have work to do. We have to frame this as an opportunity for advocates to engage on their issue, even if that issue is losing in legislation. There's the opportunity to confirm judges who are upholding civil and human rights or any given issue that we care about. Judges are on every issue that we care about. So it's a reframing that we have to engage in that will be hard work. But if we effectively engage in that reframing over the long term, it will be to our benefit, and people will have a better understanding of how all three branches of government work in synergy.
All right, my last question for you for the moment, and then we're going to move to we'll keep going around. So I think this is really important to understand, how historic this nomination is, because it's for the first time in a long time. I'm really excited about this. And I want to educate our viewers on some of the facts around Judge Brown Jackson's nomination that we should highlight to shore up support for her confirmation amongst different communities, because in so many ways we've already talked about this is historic, but let's talk about some of the facts behind what she's done and her qualifications.
Absolutely. So what makes Judge Jackson unique? I have 4 points to share. Judge Jackson has served on the district court and the circuit court. That makes Judge Jackson a unique nominee in addition to the Supreme Court. Has also served on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, so has a really unique eye towards justice, advocacy, or better put, related to sentencing, related to the justice system, and has served as a public defender. We can't say that enough. Having the opportunity to engage with individuals who would not necessarily have had access to counsel. And I don't think that we should shy away from the fact that this is the first Black woman nominee. This would be the fifth woman on the court after 115, if I have the number right, judges that have served on the Supreme Court, justices that have served on the Supreme Court. That's a huge deal. And it's an opportunity to engage communities for which that is a big deal. So I share those four, keeping in mind it's about how we frame and how we engage different communities on those particular 4 points.
Thank you for that. All right, Anisha, I want to come back to you. And Fakisha, I'm going to ask you the same question. The right-wing media has already started their right-wing disinformation campaign against Judge Brown Jackson. And we see, these attacks, these disgusting race-based sexist attacks on a very qualified person who should be on our Supreme Court. This person belongs on our Supreme Court. And they're suggesting that President Biden nominating a Black woman is some sort of affirmative action. And people like Tucker Carlson demanding to see her LSAT scores. How do we counter these racist and sexist narratives driven by disinformation on the right?
Yeah, I mean, and part of the answer here is really that we just talk about exactly how qualified she is, right? Especially in the context of other people who are justices. Judge Jackson has more judicial experience than 4 current justices when they were nominated combined. So we're talking about Justices Thomas, Roberts, Kagan, and Barrett. She has more experience. So really harping on, just how qualified she is. We never have this conversation about nominees who are not women or people of color. There are numerous Black women who are highly qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. And were, the folks that we were choosing, or Biden administration was choosing between. And there's no difference here with Judge Jackson. It's just long past time that a Black woman sit on the Supreme Court in the land. And we know that part of that historic nature is going to come with racist and sexist attacks. And it's our job to keep focused, have her back, and really just talk about that she's highly qualified, ready to serve. She's already serving as a circuit court judge. She's previously served as a district court judge. She's been a federal public defender. She's worked in private practice. It's kind of a no-brainer, and it's important for us to just focus on those qualifications.
I couldn't agree more. And also, I feel like anytime Tucker Carlson attacks somebody, you know that's a good sign that they're qualified, because as Mike just said in our chat, Tucker Carlson is not qualified to fry tacos at Jack in the Box. So he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I feel like anytime he's out there spreading lies and disinformation, that probably means you're actually highly qualified for the court. Fakisha, I want to bring you in on this, especially, as a Black woman, as a woman who practices law. You probably experience this and see this all the time in your practice. Why is that happening? And how do you think we combat that as a Black woman?
Well, I'm going to give you two different perspectives. So yes, I have experienced that, but I experienced that not only from clients, but from judges. I was recently asked when I made a remote appearance in Northern Nevada whether or not I was a lawyer. Even though I logged in and made an appearance for a client, right? You can't possibly be the lawyer, you have to be the client, right? Because I'm Black and knew nothing else about me, even though my bar number was also in the shot. So I thought that was, it almost hurt my feelings. And then I started laughing about it. I was like, nah, I think I got this law license. I've had one for 20 years, and then just roll it off. So as far as the attacks and how you deal with them, as we always have when we're attacked, you know, like Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high, and you just have to keep your head up. You let the dirt roll off, and you, as she has. I think that her nomination is going to be very tricky for the Republicans. I mean, Tucker Carlson, yeah, whatever. He's going to do what he's going to do. But for the Republicans who just voted for her, and for her to only have been in that seat for a year, it just reeks of racism if they reverse their position, because she hasn't done anything that's been controversial in that year. Some people are touting because she shot down one of Trump's lawsuits, but so did every other judge. I mean, everybody shot them down, right?
I mean, if it's unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. It doesn't matter who the president is. If it's not upholding the Constitution, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the judiciary is very sensitive about coming off as racist. I think that the senators, especially in those tight races, and I think the other thing that people really aren't considering is we've had huge demographic population shifts due to the pandemic. And so those areas that were sort of purplish are now going to tend a little bit more blue. And the word, at least I actually listen to conservative media because I want to know what my enemy is thinking. Their word is that they're not going to go too hardcore against this nomination because they're trying to concentrate their messaging on the inflation. So you have a little internal discourse going on within the Republican Party about how hard they want to fight. Of course, they've got to at least act like they're kicking and screaming because that supports Trump. But I also wanted to reframe and answer your question in a more long range way of thinking. And one thing that I think that we have failed at miserably on the left is addressing the issues in the third branch of government. The Republicans realized that 40 years ago, when they put a huge investment in the Federal Society, and that became the way that you went to the top of the list. All of Trump's appointees were members of the Federal Society. Trump actually took the list from the Federal Society to make his appointments. And so you have an organization that is basically not only creating a pathway to the Supreme Court and the federal bench in whole, but they also have created a network that supports that financially and in the power dynamic. All of these people are in big law firms. They represent big money. Their clients are big. And so they have created a world and a support system for their ideological base. And it has always been conservative. And they realized that 40 years ago. And that's why they were effective when Trump was in office. So I think, and I've always said this, that we've missed this playbook. That doesn't mean that we can't steal that playbook. And every time we get a playbook, we do it better. So I think that it is long past the time that we develop our own counter agency in order to concentrate strictly on the judiciary. We did manage to do a little bit of that here in Nevada. We have, I'm a big fan of all my public defenders that just took the bench. We had over 9 public defenders seated in the last election. That is unheard of. We now represent almost 20% of our bench here. And so it's a playbook that can work if that is our goal, if we put our minds to it. And I think really now is an excellent time because people are starting to realize that these elected positions affect their life so dramatically. So now you have, the conservatives are already there. The school board races, right? They raised holy hell through all these school board meetings, and now their people are running for those seats. And so they understand the dynamic about how to basically affect elected office, but with the appointed office, or even to get the nomination, you've got to be on the list. As a Democratic Party, we don't even have a list, so we don't have anybody who's creating the list. We don't have anybody who's maintaining the list. And so when we do have our opportunities, we are not ready to shake and bake like the Trump administration and push, 200 lifetime appointments through in a period of less than 3 years. So now that we know that that's how we do it, we need to start doing it. And that's where we need to be. We need to organize around it in the broader sense, and how we're going to keep this narrative live for a longer period of time. Because it's only a matter of time before more Supreme Court justices have to retire, and we have to be ready and ready to pounce.
Absolutely. Anisha, I want to come back to you because, obviously kind of the issues around the Supreme Court that you talked about from 2016 until now have really been focused on abortion. I come from Planned Parenthood myself. It's kind of like we overlap like this. And, of all of the issues that I have the honor and privilege to work on, I think abortion is nearest and dearest to my heart. We know that Nevada is kind of a safe haven at this point for abortion. We see them even here trying to chip away at a person's right to choose, a pregnant person's right to choose. But the Supreme Court is going to issue a decision on Dobbs v. Jackson this summer. And like I said, Nevada is a pro-choice state, but how can we prepare for the worst while fighting to defend abortion rights and access nationwide? And frankly, how does that play into the conversation around the Supreme Court, but also all of our courts?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation, right? I know that we're all thinking about this as the tax to abortion has really gone to a whole new level. We know that this has been a hot button issue for quite some time, but in recent years, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen hundreds and hundreds of bills across the country be introduced. And now here we are where, we know that some of these bills end up getting passed and being challenged, rightfully so, and making their way up. And this one has gone up to the Supreme Court. And, this Texas abortion ban, we're already seeing the consequences nationwide. And we can expect that is exactly what we will see, if this Dobbs case does not go our way. For over a half of a year, the constitutional right to abortion has effectively been suspended in Texas. And the harm has been catastrophic on Texans and their families. States surrounding Texas like Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas, Colorado, Missouri, they've been feeling the effects of that ban. Just between September and December, Planned Parenthood health centers in these states saw an 800% increase in abortion patients from Texas compared to the previous year. These abortion bans compound existing hurdles to access that care by forcing people to travel and just receive this essential care that should be available to them in their communities. And we know these barriers will impact and do impact people of color, Black, Latino, Indigenous communities, people with low incomes, people who live in rural areas, and it will affect Nevadans as well. So this is something that we're thinking about. Planned Parenthood has been preparing for this moment. We have, and will continue to fight for our patients in our health centers. But it's a real moment right now. And all we can do and what we all need to do is raise that awareness of how important abortion access is for those around us, for the people we love. And to continue to fight. And the courts is one way to do that. The reason we're in this situation is because the courts got away from us. And we can't let that happen again. And we need to do everything we can because we know this is not the only abortion case coming through the Supreme Court. There will be more in the future. There are, like I said, hundreds of laws that are just sitting and waiting to be passed, and then go to the district court and then the circuit court. And the Supreme Court only hears 100 cases, but these lower courts hear thousands and thousands of cases that don't make it to the Supreme Court. So we need to be thinking not just about, I know there's lots of conversations about court reform for the Supreme Court, but we need to be thinking about the lower courts too. What does expanding that look like? What does diversifying that look like? What does adding reproductive health champions into those courts look like as well? So that we're not in this situation again, and that we're learning from this, and we're making our courts stronger and better for us to protect our rights as these attacks continue.
Thank you for that, Anisha. All right. So before we go to audience questions, and we are coming to audience questions, so if you have questions, put them in the chat, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, wherever, YouTube, wherever you are, put them in the chat. We'll get to your questions in a few minutes. Also share this with your friends, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. We want people to understand how they can weigh in on this process. And that's actually my next question. And Cedric, I'm going to start with you. In Nevada, we're very lucky. We have two senators who are incredible, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and Senator Jackie Rosen. They are incredible. We're so lucky to have them. They understand the importance, I think, of this nomination, of all of the issues that are on the line, and we're very lucky. But in your opinion, how do we educate Nevadans on the importance of this moment for the courts? Because we still need to encourage our senators to do the right thing. And how do Nevadans play a role, maybe in other states, to be helpful with this nomination process? And I'm going to ask this question for all three of you. So Cedric, I'm going to start with you.
Absolutely. I think that this is a moment where you all can be wind in the sails to the senators and still make those calls to thank them for the fact that they support this nominee, and to encourage them to engage other senators related to this nomination process. Of course, you all as constituency leaders can work with them and think through what that may look like based on what issues. But what I always hear from my Hill colleagues is thank yous go a long way. So we constantly encourage that week after week as we send out action alerts. I will also say that in a few ways, I see Nevadans being helpful overall. For example, Center for Popular Democracy, who has been an amazing coalition partner, is moving forward with phone banks, joining national tactics like phone banks. Text banking is always extremely helpful in terms of outreach. Then also, of course, you all are in the Ninth Circuit. So what does it look like to start building out a broader network with other states that are in the big Ninth Circuit to start to think through a circuit-based coalition so that you all can be on the same page, or at least have an understanding of what advocates are engaged in and working through when it comes to that next level of the federal judiciary. But I'll close by saying with larger organizations, and I'm more than happy to share that these calls to action with you, getting involved in reaching out through different activities and tactics.
And Cedric, just a follow-up question for you, because I do think this is important. If folks want to better educate themselves on, upcoming judicial nominees for lower courts or decisions maybe that affect them, what are some ways for them to educate themselves? What are some resources folks can look to, not just for the Supreme Court, because obviously the Supreme Court is sexy, right? Everybody watches that. But these lower courts, like Anisha and Fakisha said, are just as important, if not more important, because they're hearing more cases. Where should people be educating themselves?
So at the Leadership Conference, we have a Fair Courts page on our website. Alliance for Justice, a trusted partner, keeps track of the nominations and the vacancies, in addition to information related to each nominee. Also, the American Constitution Society keeps track of the nominations as well, and follows and tracks the issues. I will also say, chances are, if you're part of a broader constituency-based organization like Planned Parenthood, like the Sierra Club, like NAACP, they are following this information in terms of the cases that are coming through. So what is important in this moment is, of course, developing an understanding of how these court cases impact our daily lives, but then also who are making these decisions? Who are these judges? How long have they been at their post? And are there any upcoming vacancies? And I would be remiss if I don't repeat this 3 times. Every senator votes on every judge. Every senator votes on every judge. Every senator votes on every judge. So it's not just judges for Nevadans, for example, that your senators vote on. Your senators vote on every judge that comes forth. So keeping that in mind, if a national organization or a state coalition reaches out and is asking for support, lend that support. This is how we're all interconnected when it comes to all levels of the federal judiciary, Supreme Court, Circuit Court, and the District Court, is the fact that every senator votes on every judge.
Thank you for that. All right, Anisha, you've worked in Nevada with me a long time. How do Nevadans make their voice heard all across the country? And what things, suggestions do you have for our viewers at home before we get to audience questions?
Everything Cedric said, right? Thanking them, thanking your senators, thanking and asking them to give floor speeches, pushing their colleagues, all that. But also use this moment to talk about the courts. People are excited right now. They're talking about this nominee. They're talking about the Supreme Court. They're paying attention. This is the time to use that to get them to pay attention to the lower courts, to educate them on how it works, how the processes work, what cases are at stake or in front of them. To pull up a map, you can literally Google a map of the circuit courts and look at what circuit you live in and talk about that. I like to tell people, there's ways to look up who your representative is. Think of this the same way. Who are your judges? Who are the people who are deciding cases for you? What are they about? Are there vacancies in your area, in your district, in your circuit? And if so, are there names being suggested to your senators? Are there names that you want to be suggesting to your senators? Are there people in your networks that are lawyers that you think would be great judges? Really just get involved and educate others around you to get involved, because it is that education that really does drive this home. And I'll also say to piggyback off Cedric, Planned Parenthood's website also has tying in reproductive health care and abortion access to why courts matter. We have a Reclaim the Courts website. So it's, check it out. And you're able to kind of talk about it through issues, because a lot of times people need to feel it and know how it personally affects them to get engaged in this conversation.
Thank you. And just for the folks at home, we're going to post all of these links so that you all have the leadership conference, you have Planned Parenthood. Fakisha doesn't have a link, so we'll put BBP stuff in there. But, since she's our vice president at BBP, we'll do that. All right, Fakisha, as the Nevadan on the panel, or the fellow Nevadan on the panel, what would you suggest to our viewers about what we should be doing right here at home? And, also not just on this SCOTUS nomination, but for all of our judicial nominees, even, with the judges coming up on the ballot, how are we going to be educating ourselves? We're going to have a voter guide, but what else can they do to educate themselves about the lower level judicial candidates?
Well, first of all, you have to be engaged. You have to be looking, you have to be reading. One of the big secrets about the judiciary is they well, I won't say everyone. Some of them like lower voter turnout because then it just turns on name recognition. That's generally how most elections run, unless there's a presidential or some hot button issue that's on the ballot. And, our last election, we had 56 judicial departments. And so it was a matter of encouraging everybody, and the messaging was go all the way down the ballot. So we try to reinforce that message. We try to put it out there, but this cycle is going to be very difficult. And the lawyers and the people in the legal community that I work in are watching judges run unopposed, watching seats that should be contested go uncontested. And part of that is a lot of the tension with people getting into the political sphere altogether right now, right? The way that they have demonized election officials, school board officials, any public figure, it's really hard to get people to sign up for that. One of the, this is something that we're having a problem with right now in a local election. We're trying to make sure that people have competition for those seats, because if you don't have competition, you just get stuck with whoever threw their name out there. And that's the way it works. So as far as engaging, a lot of people will be running voter guides. The big thing is to get yourself connected to an organization who actually will give you information, and getting people connected to those vehicles of information. But this all goes along with the long line of we have to have a big picture, and we have to constantly work toward that big picture. And we have to develop those relationships so that we're constantly working toward it. Because basically, especially here in Nevada, we've had a real big issue with different elected officials, especially national figures, wanting the vote on the election year and then not delivering anything afterward. That's not true for judges. They're going to be right there in your neighborhood all day, every day, sitting in court. It's the biggest issue is just making sure that people are connected and they realize that these judges have a direct impact on your life, more so than any other government official. 50% of marriages are going to end in divorce. That goes before a judge. So half of the people who get married are going to end up before a judge. Do you want a really fair judge when that happens? Or maybe you did something that's Vegas, your worst day, right? Your worst day, you got caught doing something bad in a town, probably under the influence of one of the delicious alcoholic beverages one of these fine restaurants was serving. And so you want to make sure that the person who actually hears that case has the compassion to understand that this is your behavior on your worst day, right? And so a lot of that has to do with the networking. That a lot of that has to do with being connected in the community and making sure that you've actually listened to the judges. Like, a lot of people throw up a website, they throw up some billboards, and then they go hide in the corner. And unless they have an opponent, unless people are asking them questions, they get the seat. And that's going to happen here. We have right now, our candidate filing period is just opened, and we have a lot of contested races, but there are several races that if no one else puts their name in, that person's going to get elected.
Yeah, it's so scary.
It is so scary.
Okay, let's go to some audience questions really quickly. We'll go a few minutes over if that's okay. So Guadalupe, and anybody can answer this, so just popcorn, whoever wants to answer. Guadalupe asks, how does the Supreme Court affect our daily lives in our country? And I think, obviously the example of abortion is a great one, but there's so many issues that the Supreme Court actually affects our daily lives, just like government affects our daily lives. I often hear from people, oh, well, the government has no impact on me. Bullshit. So let's talk about that. Some examples of how the Supreme Court affects our daily lives in this country?
DACA, federal taxes, right? Whether or not, and there's not an aspect that it doesn't affect. And I think people get sort of overwhelmed by that. So if you think about what the great part about being in Nevada, we still have mail-in ballots, right? In Texas, they don't have that anymore. In Atlanta, they're removing ballot boxes, right? And if the Supreme Court says it's okay and that's not an infringement of your voting rights, then you can't exercise the rights that you want. So those are the two regular ones, but it affects everything. And people really, I think immigration is a very good one. The other one that comes up and people really sort of miss it is union rights. The Supreme Court will regularly change the terms of your employment and labor organizations. So, I mean, from your job to your children, right? The COVID ruling that they issued, there's not really a part of your life, if it makes it there, that they will not address. So think big, not small, as far as the impact on your life.
Cedric, I saw you come off mute. You want to add to that?
Sure. I'll just add that the big kind of paradox of it all is that the Supreme Court gets all the attention, but there are so many quote unquote lower court rulings that relate to our daily lives, just as was shared. So thinking about access to healthcare, rules related to the pandemic, voting rights, the list goes on. If the Supreme Court doesn't take up a case, then the lower court ruling stands. So that means that these, over 800 other minus 9 federal judges are making the decisions that affect our lives in infinite issues that we care about.
Yeah, sorry, Anisha, go ahead. I'll add my comment after you're done.
I was just going to say, we know that the Jackson Women's Health decision will not, Judge Jackson's confirmation will not affect the outcome of the case, the abortion case, but there are so many other cases headed to the court next fall, including critical LGBTQ rights and other issues. There's a case that's actually challenging the previously decided case, a Masterpiece Cake Shop case that we all know about, which concerned a Colorado baker who refused to make a wedding cake. This new case, 303 Creative, concerns a similar kind of situation and is trying to overrule that. So, that's just another example of a hot case that's going to be coming down in the fall, and happens every year. We have some of those cases that really impact such a large portion of our population and our communities. And so just echoing everything everyone just said, it affects every single one of us in some way or another.
Well, and I just want to remind the viewers at home too, it's not just these federal courts. I mean, Fakisha was talking about the lower level courts, but Nevada has its own Supreme Court where many of our issues end up when we're working on them at the legislature. A good example of one that's kind of moving through the courts right now is our ghost guns bill from last session. That is in the courts right now and being litigated, with the potential to go on to higher courts because, the right wants to use this as an example, even though that legislation is solid. So for me, it impacts my life every single day in the work that we do on all of the different issues we work on.
And just
okay.
one side.
Yeah, go ahead, Fakisha. Yep.
I was just saying that the one that I'm really scared of is the Texas transgender ban that it's not technically a ban now, but them labeling it as child abuse, and that any transgender services, hormone replacement therapy, everything like that. But I mean, that is a test case. They're all coming out of ALEC. These bills are coming out of ALEC. That's a test case to see how far they can push back transgender rights, right? If they can say that it's child abuse, they can create a crime from it. And then we're really all in trouble because they will push that issue all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then even our gender could be determined, right? So some of it can be scary. So you have to watch and pay attention because sometimes they get bad ideas from other states.
This is a question from Terry, and Fakisha, I think this is an interesting one for you because a lot of places don't elect their judges. It's just, weird ass Nevada and a few other states. I think there's benefits to electing our judges. I think there's, also deltas to electing our judges because people don't know who they're electing. So Terry asked, do you think there will ever be a time when all nonpartisan elected offices will become partisan? And I'm assuming she's talking about these judicial situations that we have in Nevada where, you got to go dig deep and see, are these people more left leaning, more right leaning, and figuring out where they stand on issues is so critical to how we vote for people.
Well, it's really interesting that somebody asked that question because as soon as we were successful in putting all the federal public defenders, the local public defenders on our local benches, the district attorney commented that maybe it's time for us to go to the appointment process. So elections swing both ways. That keeps them flexible. But the idea of reporting party with when you're running for the bench, that has I can't remember a state that has elected judges where they declare their party, because elected judges are also in Nashville, another jurisdiction that I lived and worked in for a long time. And even the nonpartisan nature of the judges, even though you can find out if you really want to, I think that stays. I think that stays because judges by judicial rule have to appear impartial. And so once you put an R or a D or an I beside you, automatically you're going to create a conflict with anybody that appears before you that doesn't have that initial, right? So I don't think that they become partisan. I think the greater threat is they take the power away from the people and give it to other elected officials for appointment process. So I think if there were going to be a change, that is the way that they would go.
Thank you for that. All right, next question. I think this is one a lot of people are wondering. Shelby asked, will the confirmation of Judge Brown Jackson also face the same need for more than 50 votes as some of the pieces of legislation have faced recently? Anisha, you want to take that one? Oh, Anisha, you want to take that one? Okay, Cedric, you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. If you could repeat that.
Yeah, so will the confirmation of Judge Brown Jackson also face the same need for more than 50 supporters or votes as some pieces of legislation have faced recently in the Senate?
Oh, no. Considering a number of rule changes within the past, say 7 to 8 years, there will only need to be a simple majority to ensure that Judge Jackson would then become Associate Supreme Court Justice Jackson. So all it takes is 50 plus 1, and it's a done deal.
Beautiful. All right, this next question, I'm going to come to you on this too, Cedric. Brenda asks, is it possible for the Biden administration to expand the court during this current term?
I will first start off by saying that the Leadership Conference doesn't have a stance on court expansion at this point. I will say that the Biden administration can put forth a plan related to court expansion if that administration chooses to do so. But considering where the Senate is at, I would not see that happening. There are a number of House hearings that have taken place related to court expansion. I think that this is, in my own personal opinion, a great time to engage in those exploratory conversations related to what it means to expand the court. Why? I mean, there are myriad reasons, in terms of population. Of course, there's the political aspect of it all. But at this point, the Biden administration could put out a plan for it, but there really is no clear congressional path forward to ensuring that that would happen.
Anisha, you want to chime in here?
So, it's not just expanding. I think a lot of folks, when they think about court reform, are only talking about expanding the Supreme Court. And I really want to emphasize that it's also the lower courts. We are long overdue. Since the 90s. We have not expanded the number of seats on the lower courts, and judges are overworked. They need help. We're talking about ethics reform. The Supreme Court is not held to an ethics standard, which is insane. And so there's so much we can do and think about when we're thinking about court reform broadly. That might not, like Cedric said, we don't have the Senate in a place where we can maybe think about some of the bolder reforms, but we can definitely start thinking about some that are just long overdue.
Okay, so this next question is from Amber, and I think this is a question that a lot of people also have. Right now, what does the timeline look like for getting Judge Brown Jackson confirmed? Obviously, again, this is the Senate, this is politics, so we can say there's a timeline, but maybe it doesn't fall in place. But as it stands right now, what do we think that timeline is? And Amber asked, how long do we think it will take to fully confirm Judge Brown Jackson?
I'm happy to chime in. So at this point, Judge Jackson this week has had a number of courtesy visits with senators on the Hill. To my knowledge, those will continue as we prepare for the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, which will start March 21st. So those will go from March 21st, Monday through Thursday, March 24th. Then we look forward to that next week, most likely, what is known as a committee markup, where the Senate Judiciary Committee will have the opportunity to provide a final vote on the nominee. And from that point until the beginning of a Senate recess, which is slated for April 11th, that Monday, we're looking forward to a vote most likely on Friday, April 9th, or Saturday, April 10th, in my own personal opinion. So we'll see, of course, where that timeline goes. But that is the goal that we've heard so far. So while this seems swift, President Biden has certainly taken time from the point of Justice Breyer's retirement announcement to finally put forth a nominee that was shared on February 25th, which I want to note is the 2-year anniversary of his campaign promise to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court. So from that point, we are now in this space where the courtesy visits are happening, Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, Executive Committee markup activity the week afterward, then moving into final Senate floor activity, which we assume will conclude with a final vote around April 9th, or I'm sorry, April 8th or April 9th.
Well, from your mouth to the goddess's ears, Cedric, let's make sure that that actually happens. And it also gave me chills when you told me that that was like the 2-year mark of his promise. That's pretty cool. That's actually really awesome. All right, last question. And I think this is a really good one. We'll just let all three of you kind of close with this. And also, if folks want to get in touch with you, tell us how to do that. So how do we best support Judge Brown Jackson? And how do we make sure, we are pushing back against any challenges or mis/disinformation that's out there? So Anisha, I'm going to start with you.
It's kind of a lot of what we've talked about. Talk as much as you can with those about why the courts are important. Talk about this nomination, how historic it is. Make those calls to your senators. Really engage in this as if these folks are representing you, because they are. Everything that we talk about, everything that we do is affected by the courts, and the courts have an impact. And so the louder our voice, the more the courts will have to listen and be represented by for us and by us and to us. So just making sure that we're really having those conversations and engaging as much as we can. I will say again, and I always like to end with something like this because it's a positive note. The movement has made a difference. Over the last few years, I have seen a change in how people engage on the courts that we just have never seen before. So we just have to keep that up. Keep engaging and make sure that we're seeing progress and restoring our courts to where they need to be to really represent us. If you want to be in touch, you can find me on Twitter, Anisha_S113. Of course, follow and support Planned Parenthood's channels as well on Twitter, Facebook, and the website that I know that Annette and others are going to link, which is our Reclaim the Courts website that explains what has happened to the courts and how it impacts reproductive health care.
And for our Nevadans, if you want to follow Planned Parenthood's in Nevada, it's Planned Parenthood of Southern Nevada, and yes, Planned Parenthood Marmonte up north. And then for our statewide kind of work that we do with Planned Parenthood all the time, it's Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada. So you can find them online. They do amazing work, and we work with them all the time here. All right, Cedric, leave us with your final thoughts on this process and how we best support Judge Brown Jackson.
Absolutely. So everything you've learned here, we hope that this is giving you information that you can share with other people. A fact I love to share is that for quote unquote normal people, they think about politics, government, maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day on average. So chances are, if you've tuned into this entire webcast, you're not normal, and that's okay. What's important is that you are engaging people who trust you, who see you as a leader, who see you as an advocate, and who will go to you to learn more about any given political or government issue, but certainly related to this Supreme Court vacancy. So take the time on your social channels Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to post from organizations that we've mentioned. Certainly, Battleborn Progress will share further materials that we are developing as national advocates. We will share the the Confirmed Jackson organizing guide that we just released today as field organizers. Our digital colleagues have just released guidance as well. So we look forward to that being shared as well. And I want to leave you all with something a little agitational, which is that our opposition, we've many times say that they play chess and we play checkers. If we don't become more invested in the federal judiciary or courts overall, just learning little by little, we will continue to play checkers while our opposition plays chess. So look at this as, if this is your first time really learning about the courts, look at this as a learning opportunity. This is your time to gain a better understanding and to join a community of dedicated advocates who are seeking a more fair judiciary, of course, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. The Supreme Court is the pinnacle, but there is a pipeline of judges that start, whether it is at elected office or appointed office locally, may become Supreme Court, state Supreme Court justices, may from there go to the federal judiciary, which is happening right now. Or, of course, from that point, go to the Supreme Court. So taking the time to learn about these judicial nominees, these current judges that are in your own backyard, that are across the country, that is an entry point into learning how to play chess and how to fight for what you believe in and how to take on your opposition and to confirm judges that will advance civil and human rights and work for us all.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, Fakisha, bring it home. What should we do to support Judge Brown Jackson? How do we lift up this fabulous, intelligent, amazing Black woman who we want to be on the court? What do we need to do?
I was looking at the chat, trying to keep up with the chat as we were talking. And I think one person had a comment that both of our senators are fine. They're lockstep. We don't have to worry about them. I tend to agree with that. I like the idea of calling them to thank them because nobody ever gets enough thank yous. But guess what we're right next door to? We're right next door to Utah. And we have a shot at Mitt Romney. And a lot of people have connections, family, friends, travel, vacation in Utah. So lean on your connections in Utah to contact Mitt Romney. I can vote for you. I want you to vote this way. And politicians will listen to that. I've tried to contact senators in other states. Generally, if your area code is not their area code, they will not even respond to you. But I say lean on your friends and family, lean on your social networks in the places where we can have impact. A lot of people in Nevada have great connections to Utah. Lean on your Utah contacts. We only need 50 plus one. I would love to see it come in higher. I think the estimations right now is maybe 53, 54 is sort of where we're at, but Mitt Romney's one on the fence. And putting pressure on those senators that are on the fence, getting people in their jurisdictions to actually vote for to announce and call and make a lot of noise. Your friends can be rowdy too. So encourage your friends to be rowdy as well. And if you need to reach me, you can reach me through Battleborn Progress or also by email, fakishamiller@gmail.com, the most original email ever.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for this exciting conversation tonight. I know my staff and I were nerding out in our chat. Y'all are amazing. We'll have you back again. Cedric, now you're part of the family. You're never getting rid of us.
So. And sorry, one last piece. I forgot to mention how to get in contact. So my Twitter handle is Cedso, CEDSAIDSO. And feel free to email me, CLAWSON@civilrights.org.
Awesome. Well, like I said, now you're part of the family, so you're never going to get rid of us. So hopefully you'll come back when Judge Brown Jackson is nominated and we can all celebrate something for once in our lives. So that'd be great. All right. Well, thank you to this amazing panel. Thank you to all of our guests who stuck around a little after. I appreciate it. It was such a great conversation tonight. Thank you to our East Coast friends who stuck with us a little later too. I appreciate that. And yes, please call our senators, call Senator Cortez Masto, call Senator Rosen, thank them, encourage them, give them the support they need. We need to be doing that right now. But also, like Fakisha said, call your friends in Utah, call your friends in Arizona, and let's get these folks shored up because we need to bring this home and we need to have a win. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We appreciate you always supporting Battleborn Progress's work. And we will be back next week with another Out in Front Thursday at 5 o'clock. Thank you again. Stay safe, and we will see you all soon. Have a great evening, everyone.